Eyes wide open. In the heart of Appalachia, legends whisper of unseen spirits and shadowy figures. Don't forget to subscribe as we step deep into the misty woods to uncover what many refuse to talk about. Are they lost or something much darker? Let's take a look.
There is a chance that the stories that us Appalachian people tell you about the spooky stuff that goes on in our woods, the Mothman, the cryptids, the not deer, the feral people, that we're all just making it up so that you Californians don't pack up your whole family and move here and turn a single-story ranch home into $1 million investment and ruin what's left of our natural beauty. We could just be telling stories. But maybe we're not. And here's the thing, we're not going to tell them. So, you want to take the risk? I don't think you do. Country road.
My scariest experience involving Appalachian folklore cryptids type things. Here's the time I was chased by a windy boy. Disclaimer, I do say chased because I ran. I didn't know what this thing was, and I've paid the price, so here we go. So a few years ago, I go to take my dog outside to use the restroom. I take her out my front door to the side of my house, and behind my house is that field and that wooded area. As you guys know, if you've watched my lives of that field and stuff, I live on a decently busy road. And suddenly, there were no cars. There was no wind. There was no birds chirping. There was nothing. While that was happening, my dog decides to hyper-focus on the woods behind my house. I'm like, that's none of my business. That's definitely none of my business. So I just look down at her and I'm like, please go pee so we can go in the house. She's on a leash, of course, and this dog takes off sprinting. So of course she's attached to me. I run too. My door, like most doors, I guess, has a big wooden metal door, and then it has a screen door. So I shut both of them, obviously. I watch, as we're charging for this door, I watch the big door, not the screen door, fly open. Okay, no one was there. My husband was upstairs working. No one was there. So I open the screen door and we jump in because now I'm scared. Why'd that door just fly open and why did I run to it? I just felt safer. I was like, even though I did not know what was chasing me, I was like, this is a safer area than whatever's outside. So we get inside, I shut the big door and something slams into that door so hard that my pictures fly off my wall. I look out the peephole, nothing's there. I don't see anything at that point. So I come in here, immediately sit down. I have lived here my entire life. The older generations here tell you the rules, but don't tell you why they're telling you the rules. Like to never whistle outside, don't answer your name. I was told that my whole life, but I was never told why. And now I was being told why. And ever since then in that field, I have heard screaming. I've heard my name being called. I've heard crying. I've seen deer that are reflective. It's been a mess. And I don't know. But that is probably the scariest experience I have ever had with Appalachian folklore creatures. Well, the Fae was kind of intense too, but that's another story.
Can things in the Appalachian Mountains be explained away? Like weird footsteps or babies crying, animal noises. I would say probably back around 3 or 4 years ago, I was on the back porch with one of my friends back home. Back home is Eastern Kentucky in the middle of nowhere. And if you haven't been outside at night in Appalachia or any country place in general, it's super dark. There's no light pollution, there's no noise pollution. It's dark, it's quiet, it's serene. So we're sitting on the back porch and her back porch backs into basically the woods. So we're sitting there, we're chatting. It's probably past midnight. It's super late at night. But again, I was home, I was visiting with somebody. We hadn't chatted in a while. So we're just yapping like a bunch of little girls. And so all of a sudden I hear something rustling in the leaves, walking towards us. And it's not an animal because there are animals everywhere. And it's not like a squirrel, a dog, anything. It sounds heavier. It sounds like human or a large animal footsteps walking towards where we were slowly. Okay, so keep in mind their porch actually is off the ground and there's no steps to go off the back porch. It's covered off the ground. So nothing could have gotten to us. But anyways, I hear these steps and they're going towards us as we're having conversations. And we've stopped talking at this point and we're just sitting and we're waiting. Look over at her. We're like, that has to be an animal. It has to be a dog. Could be a bear. It was cooler that night. I mean, it could be a large animal. So anyways, we don't hear it anymore. We continue talking. Then the footsteps start back. Except this time they're walking a little bit faster and you can hear the leaves crunching. You can hear the twigs breaking and it's at a faster pace and it's coming towards us from the woods. Then it stopped again. And so at this point I'm like, I don't know. I don't feel comfortable. Maybe this is something we should go in. Again, nothing could get to us. We are off the ground. So we weren't scared that somebody was physically going to walk in on the porch and get us. We let it go. 5 minutes passed. Again, we start chatting again. No big deal. Time passes. And then all of a sudden we hear like a rustling, like in that leaves, that fall night, think lots of leaves on the ground, leaves crunching sound. And we hear a baby crying. Like what sounds like an infant, a small baby. You know, like infants have that particular cry that you just know that's a tiny baby. We hear that. And again, I'm not one to like jump to conclusions, because I know that some animals do have like cries that sound like infants. So we hear it, it goes away. And we were like, maybe it's a large cat, maybe it's an animal, whatever. Time passes again. We're a little freaked out, but again, nothing can get to us. We're off the ground. There's no way you can get on this back porch. And we hear the crying again. But this time it's louder, and it's that little baby infant crying sound. So when the second time it happened, we looked at each other. Because we're like, we wrote it off as an animal. We wrote the walking off as a large animal because it could be. But we look at each other when the second time this crying occurs, and then it gets really silent. I mean, dead silent. I don't know if you've ever been in the woods and heard silence. Nothing. There's no bugs chirping. There's the leaf crunch is gone. The baby crying is gone. No birds, nothing. It's silent. And as we're looking at each other, we hear 3 loud knocks from what sounds like a tree that's probably feet in front of us. Needless to say, we didn't have to say a word. We both stood up and ran inside.
Grab your blanket and get cozy. This is going to be a several-part series. Many years ago, my husband and I bought this beautiful property in this little bed and breakfast town that was built almost 100 years ago with a barn that was built in the early 1800s. This was right after we had gotten married, so I mean, we were scraping and saving to buy this house. We knew when we purchased the home, there were a lot of renovations that needed to be done, so much so that when we purchased the home, we dragged a mattress into the living room and we slept out of there and worked on the home around us for months. One of the first areas we decided to renovate was the former attic, which we wanted to make into a big bedroom with a bathroom and a dressing and makeup room area for me. The first step to working up there was really getting everything out. So all of the paper mache insulation needed to be pulled out, and we were finding like bits and bobs, pieces of cardboard, hundreds of old shoeboxes, stamps from Chicago to our little town, some of the most interesting little things from the 1920s and 1930s. While moving all of these things out from underneath the floorboards with the insulation, we also found this really beautiful old nightgown made of silk trimmed with lace. It was old, stained, and discolored. It looked like it had been under the floorboards for maybe close to 100 years. My husband and I continue to clear the area. He has a shovel. He's pulling out material out from underneath the floorboards, and we hear like dink, dink, and then my husband goes, "Oh, I know what that is." And I'm like, "Okay, like what?" He pulls up this beautiful, intricate piece of lace, and underneath it is a revolver. My husband picks it up, clears it, says it's safe. We decided to look it up online. We find that it's a Thames Arms revolver from the Holmes build period. At this point, we hadn't really put things together, and then a series of events started occurring that made it seem like we were not wanted messing around or disturbing anything in the attic anymore. On my way home from a night shift, I was in a catastrophic car accident when the tire of my car blew out and I hit the back of a tractor trailer. And this thing stopped like inches away from my face. I mean, we were close to decapitation there. Because of this, I ended up having hand surgery, and then I was at home for a while, which resulted in me noticing a significant uptick in paranormal activity. Small things at first, kind of making my husband and I question each other of, did you leave all of these lights on? Why is that door open? Did you just slam that door? Almost like we're at each other over this. The amount of paranormal activity that started in our house after we disturbed these relics was outstanding. Several months later, I'm on the mend, I'm feeling better. We decide to have some friends over. And while they're over, we take them upstairs to show them the renovation that we're doing and how we kind of stripped everything down to the studs upstairs to put in the new bedroom, bathroom, makeup room. So our friends come upstairs with us, and my girlfriend goes, "Oh, no." She goes, "No, you have something upstairs in this attic." She goes, "It does not feel good up here." And since she had said that, I was like, oh, we have to show her the stuff. Like, the stuff that's like probably over 100 years old that we found in our attic. Like, it's kind of creepy. It's kind of eerie. Like, we have this nightgown. So we had taken some of like the little marbles, stamps, the nightgown, this revolver that we found, and said, people, left these things behind. They're like over 100 years old. They had fallen through the floorboards or whatever. And our friend picks up this nightgown and she's looking at it in a way that we hadn't, like holding it up to the light. And she goes, "Is this a hole?" She's like, look at this pattern of staining. She's like, "Are you seeing this?" Now, up until this point, like, my husband and I we hadn't really done much renovation on the attic since my accident. Like, it was very clear that bad things were happening and the paranormal activity in our home was kicking up when we started messing with things in the attic. So it just wasn't the time. After our friend points this out, we have this assumption and we get very motivated. So we decide we're going to go searching for anything else that we can find. We're going to pull up the rest of these floors. We're going to search everything. What else is up here? We went so far with this that we decided to get in contact with the owners of the home before us to kind of get the timeline, figure out what's going on in this home. And we asked them about what the state of the attic was like when they lived in the home. And the previous owners pretty much say that, like, the great room in the attic, some of the floors just seemed to be pulled up with not much care, and there was a big hole in the middle of the floor when they moved in, and they never really went back up, had no need to be in the attic since then. When we asked them if they had anything to do with all of these floorboards that were pulled up and missing, or any of the things that were found in the floorboards, they said no, they just put the electric into the already existing holes of the attic. They said they had only been in the attic just a handful of times, 2 or 3 times, and didn't have any reason to do anything up there. And we're carrying on, and we're talking about the house and, like, the changes that we've decided that we're going to make. And the previous owner abruptly goes, "Have you seen the little girls in the house? Are they still there?" And I'm like, "What do you mean, little girls in the house? What do you mean, are they still there?" Like, I tell him, "No, I haven't seen any little girls in the house. We had some paranormal activity, but no little girls." The previous owner tells us that there were 2 teenage girls in the home that would laugh and slam the door at the top of the stairs. And I'm like, "No, we've not experienced this." At this point, my motto. I see something, no, I didn't. Something's there is not my business. So at this point, I don't want to go back upstairs. I'm done. We're done. Chelsea's out. But my husband is like, "No, we're going to figure out what happened." And where we decided to start was what was formerly the attic. The plan was to put a large bedroom, a bathroom, and a makeup dressing area upstairs for me, but what we needed to do first was take everything out of it. The insulation, the old flooring, everything had to go. And while we were doing that, we found some artifacts that looked like they had been there for maybe like 100 years, like original owners. And when we disrupted these things, over time, we started to have a lot of paranormal activity in the home. So upon the time we found these things and disrupted them without really thinking anything of it, the giant tree on our property fell onto our barn right after we had gotten it square back onto the foundation. Our septic tank just went on the fritz. It just backed up, which we had to handle ourselves because it was on a holiday weekend. I don't wish that on my worst enemy. I was in a terrible, catastrophic car accident where my tire blew out and I hit the back of a tractor trailer, like semi, and almost had my head taken off. And then the light bulbs in our living room kept like exploding. And I don't mean just like breaking. No. It looked like they were spun out of the socket and then dropped to the floor and broke, and then everything was scooped up in a nice pile. And the things we found in our attic over time What we covered in our last video was the nightgown, which we didn't realize was a nightgown at first, and then an old revolver, which, again, these things are like over 100 years old, and we found them kind of like scattered in the attic under the floorboards. So at first, until a friend of ours like started putting things together, we didn't think a whole lot of it. We had also found shoeboxes, stamps, letters, other pieces of clothing that were kind of shoved in to where like the insulation of the house was under the floorboards. So after uncovering these things and all this paranormal activity in the home starts, and we start having these really horrible life experiences, we seek out the previous owners of our home to kind of get some background on the property. And they tell us they basically hadn't been in the attic at all. They had no reason to be up there. They didn't do anything to the floors. But they did see 2 teenage girls that would laugh at the top of the stairs of the attic and slam the door. And they had asked us if we had seen them, and we had said, like, no, like, we definitely hadn't seen that. After we get to this point, my husband is intrigued. He's like, well, we're going to tear up the rest of the flooring upstairs. We need to see if there's anything else up there. And I'm like, no, thank you. No, thanks. You know, my overall general consensus when things like this happen is ignore it and hope it goes away. It did not go away. So my husband goes back up into the attic, and he's pulling trash bag after trash bag, like insulation, old newspapers, clearing out the attic for renovation, and he finds nothing. And so we're like, maybe that's it. Maybe we'll leave things alone up there, and the paranormal activity will calm down. But then I needed a ceiling fan installed in the living room, so we had to go to a completely different part of the attic and pull up some more floorboards that we hadn't overturned yet, to put in the electric upstairs. And he finds a check stuck to like a floorboard, like the underneath side of a floorboard, that hadn't been touched yet. So he brings the check downstairs. We're kind of looking at it, and my husband realizes that the check is made out to the original owner of the home, and the check is for a life insurance policy with the life insurance policy number there. And it's like a receipt of payout. And since he's going to run electric in that area, he starts clearing out the rest of the insulation under that area of the floorboard, and he starts pulling out these like glass vials. They're small, they're different colors. They have like cork tops in them. And we don't know what's in the vials. So the next day, my husband's cutting the lawn, and the neighbors that live next door, they've lived there like 50 some years. They're an elderly couple. They end up getting home from being away on a trip. Before all of the homes were built on our street, all of the land originally was part of the home that we live in. So to purchase their home, the elderly people that have lived next door for like 40, 50 years, to purchase the land to build their home, they had to speak to the original owners of our home. Does that make sense? So they knew them, and they went to them to purchase property. So since my husband knew that the elderly couple knew the gentleman that lived in this home first, my husband said, the people who used to live in this home, how was his wife? And the elderly man that lives next door goes, there was no wife. It was a man, and he lived in the home with his 2 daughters. So he made it very clear that he had never seen the wife, never met the wife. There was no wife. Now, mind you, we don't say anything about any of the things that we had found, none of the paranormal activity in the home. Like, the neighbors don't know anything about this. We just kind of want to pick his brain because, like I said, the things that we found were like, this is kind of strange, this is kind of suspicious, but like, it's just a hunch, right? So up to this point, we basically just have a hunch and a lot of paranormal activity, right? Like, we don't have anything concrete. And we were kind of hoping that when we spoke to the neighbors next door, it would kind of put our concerns to rest, and there'd be a completely rational reasoning as to what happened, and this is just nothing. No, it did not work like that. So my husband and I go back upstairs, and we're like, no, we are going to find anything else that is in this attic to see if we can figure out what happened. So we continue with our clean out, and I reach into like a wall, behind like a small sealed area to like pull out the insulation, kind of strip that area of the room. And I pull out what I thought was just some like material, like more clothing that was kind of padded into the insulation. And it ends up being a pair of Dickie work pants. And I pulled them up and I showed my husband, I'm like, look how old these are. Like, look at this. Wasn't quite sure what it was at first. And I hold them up and my husband is like, those are pants. And we're kind of looking at them. The light's kind of behind me, so my husband has a kind of a better view than I do. And he's like, look at those stains. We basically dishevel, pull apart, and search every inch of the upstairs before we finish the remodel. And we don't find anything else. This is the third part to the series of the artifact that we had found in my house while we were doing the remodel. And we left off with the men's pants that we found. After we found these things, we started poking around, trying to find out the history of the home, talking to the neighbors, trying to get an idea of what the property was used for before we got here. And we ended up actually finding out that the barn that was on our property was from the 1800s, very, very old. And it was actually registered as a church. So I looked at my husband and I was like, we have this barn, and when we first purchased the property, there was just so much animal feces in the barn. It was piled high. There was so much wood stacked in it that was like floor to ceiling. You couldn't even get into the barn. And my husband was like, I wonder if like there's a body in the barn or something. So we end up, doing some remodeling to the barn. It was a horse barn at one point, we believe, like an 1800s carriage barn. And we always intended on having horses. So we started cleaning the barn, tore everything up, we dug deep, pulled all the floors of the barn out, everything, nothing. And I so much wanted some kind of an explanation to these things in the home. And once we started disturbing them, like I said, the paranormal activity kind of started to kick up. Well, there was one incident where I was in the bathtub upstairs. We have a huge clawfoot bathtub. This was after the remodel was done, after I had my son, after my pregnancy. And I'm laying in the bathtub. And the way our bathroom is, our whole upstairs is like open concept. So like the bathroom is set off from the rest of the area, but there's no it's like a wall kind of blocks it off. So I'm in the bathtub and I turn my head and there's a very tall woman, very slender, has her hair tied up at the back of her neck, brown hair. She's wearing a dress that has like a turtleneck sort of style, all black dress with cuffs on her wrists. The dress goes down to her ankles. It looks like she's wearing like kind of little flat ankle boots or something. She walks very, very quickly. Her feet move like shuffle on the floor like 3 or 4 times faster than they should. It's a very uncomfortable thing to look at. And when her body turned to look at me, her entire body turned. She didn't turn her head, her entire body turned. It was the first time and the last time I ever saw her. And then she was gone. Now, as far as this property goes, it used to be part of over 100 acres. Like this whole street began with just this house. So we might never really know if she's still here or where she is, what happened. And people always ask, is there still paranormal activity in the home? Yes. Do your children see it? My daughter is only 7 months old. So far, I've not seen anything unusual. However, my son had drawn a picture of our family. And you can see, I can't really see now. There's Mom and him. He drew Dad and Grandpa. And then Grandma and his baby sister. And then that. What is that? So I'd say it's safe to say that she's probably a staple in our home at this point. She doesn't cause us any trouble. We'll feel her move through the house from time to time. Sometimes there'll be a lot of ruckus in the attic. November and December, she gets very restless and very loud in the house. There are certain people that are kind of uncomfortable in my house and say that they feel her more than other of my friends, but she doesn't bother us any. And so my husband and I are just like putting our theories together. Like, okay, so we live in this house. We have like this 100-year-old gun. We have this nightgown. We have this story that the wife allegedly was never seen. We have these vials. We have no idea what's in them. And then we have like some pieces of clothing. Now, I consider myself to be a little bit of a horror movie buff, like, you know, and I'm sitting here sifting through this information and I'm like, okay, there's a body somewhere. Like, there has to be a body here somewhere. So the first place we look, I mean, obviously we pull up all the floors upstairs, but then I'm like, there's a church on our property. They buried her in the church, right? That just makes sense. So we go into the barn, which was the church, rip all of the flooring out of it, dig, like, I mean, feet deep. It needed, like, the foundation needed repaired and everything anyways, and nothing. We pulled floors up in other parts of the house. Nothing. And in the meantime, while we're searching, we're just disturbing more shit. And it seems like whatever in our house is just getting more. One day, my husband is noticing that the plaster in our dining room has like a crack in it by our dining room table. And he's like picking at this little crack. Mind you, the house is over 100 years old. It's going to have, you know, little cracks, little imperfections. It's what makes it so great. And he's picking at this wall. And I'm like, honey, don't pick at that crack in the wall, because if you do that, we're never going to get the plaster to look the same as the rest of the walls. You know, these are 100-year-old walls. If you mess it up and we have to drywall over it or whatever, it's not going to look the same. And he's like, yeah, well, this wall never has looked the same. This wall has always looked a little like off. And he's picking at it and he goes, you know, there's no horsehair in this plaster. And like back in the day, apparently it was very common to put horsehair and filler in the plaster. And it kind of gave the plaster a bit of shape, I guess. Well, he's like, this plaster isn't the same as the rest of the house. And I'm like, that's weird. So then we get to looking at the outside of our house. Because I like, now I'm like, I want to know what's back there, right? And he's like, you know, there's a fireplace back here. And I'm like, I don't really, like, that's, why would they plaster in a fireplace? Because I know there was an oil heater back in what was my office. But like, why would they plaster in the fireplace? We didn't think much of it, right? It wasn't a big deal. There's a masonry oven here. We're not really thinking of the dates at that point. Then as time goes on, things kind of start to amp up again. Because like, we're asking questions, we're poking around, we're picking at the walls apparently. And I notice we start having like a figure standing kind of in the entryway of our closet door in our bedroom. And I'm like, what the heck is up with that? That looks like a grown man. Like, that is a big shadowy figure. And I told my husband, I'm like, I don't know what the heck is up with all of that. Like, I've heard people seeing like the hat man or whatever. This dude has no hat. It's just a rando dude standing in like the closet, right? And it's a tiny closet. 100-year-old homes have teeny tiny closets. So now I want to know. Like, I'm looking for stuff. I want to know what's going on. I want to know more about the history of the house. Well, one day I'm sitting there talking to my husband about how the house was made and, like the history of the house and like how it was interesting that there was an oil heater in the house, because in the 20s, it would have made more sense, or when the house was built, it would have made more sense to heat the house with wood. And he looks at me and he goes, oh my God, I wonder if she's in the fireplace. I'm like, hang on, what? He's like, I wonder if her in the wintertime. And then the ground was hard, you know, so he put her in the fireplace and plastered her into the wall. And I'm like, you got me up. Again, all allegedly. Like, we're just, you know, worst case scenario. It's always what we jump to, right? Then we're researching the house a little more thoroughly, and he's looking at the floors, you know, because we have wood floors, and some of it is like old school 100-year-old wood, and some of it's newer. And we're looking at where the addition went in, and he goes, you know, the bedroom closet, like where the closet is, he's like, that used to be the front door of the house. That was the front of the house. So this man that I kept seeing standing in the closet, like the doorway of our closet in our bedroom, was actually standing on his front porch. But the front porch was now part of our bedroom. So I'm like, my theory, I'm like her, allegedly, put her body in the fireplace, allegedly, plastered it into the wall, got an oil heater to heat the house. Oh, did you just hear that? My door just opened. Did you just hear that? Did you just hear? Wait. Could you not? Nims, what are you looking at? Nims? Nims. Again, allegedly. We gotta wrap this up because now I'm getting the creeps. And then I think, because we can't find her death certificate, after a reasonable amount of time, they couldn't find her, right? She's missing, they can't find her. He collected on the insurance policy, right? But then couldn't find the check when he went to move. Like, that's my theory. Got stuck under the floorboards where he hid it. That's why he ripped up all the floors trying to find this check that was lost in our attic for the last 100 years. And then we found it when we were doing the remodel. All alleged. I mean, I'm an avid horror movie watcher. I could be blowing a molehill into a mountain. I don't know. Possible. However, this time of year, in the colder months, she goes off. She's opening doors, slamming doors, pounding her feet upstairs. I don't know what happened to her, if anything did happen to her in this house, but I know that whatever it is, she's about it. 3 main reasons we haven't opened up this fireplace where there may or may not be a body. 1, it's just a guess. We're not sure if there's a body in there. This is all a hunch, okay? So there very well may be nothing. And then that brings us to number 2. Whatever is in that fireplace, whether it be a body or not, it's been closed for, I don't know, close to 100 years. So we're really opening something that's been closed for 100 years to our house. I mean, I don't know. Could there be asbestos in there? What if there is a body in there? There's definitely dust in there. Could there be, animals in there? I don't know. So, and we have a baby. Like, we live in this house. We can't just open a fireplace that's in the middle of our house and let everything that's in it come out. I mean, I don't know. And 3, do we really want to go disturbing that after all of this time? I don't know what kind of equipment it would take to go look in there. I guess we could find an area to maybe put a camera. I haven't really put a whole lot of thought into it because the plan was to never go poking around when we're really not sure what happened. Would I ever disturb it? I mean, does anyone have the equipment to come do this without disturbing my house at this point? Because really, like I said, all we have is a hunch. And there are other places I guess she could be. There's a well from the 1800s in our backyard with a concrete slab on top of it. Could it be in there? I don't know. This property itself used to be part of over 100 acres. And it's all split up into houses now. Could she be in the ground somewhere? I mean, I guess. I mean, for all we know, nothing really happened. It's all a hunch. So is she in the wall? Maybe. Is she gone? Maybe. Did he? Her? Maybe. It's all allegedly. I don't know. There would have to be something big for me to go in there and start sniffing around and pulling more things down. Because the house doesn't like it when we mess with it. A bunch of people were along for the ride and I had the means to go and pull the wall out or look in there, then sure, maybe. But guys, I can't just go tearing this wall down and opening this fireplace that's been closed for 100 years. I could probably move the concrete slab off the well, but that kind of creeps me out. And our other well, that's 100 years old, it's in our basement. We have a big hole in our basement with a 100-year-old pipe that goes down, and the water source is literally under the house. It's been there for 100 years. But the barn well isn't used anymore. So for the people going, well, when are you going to tear the fireplace out? Like that was not part of the plan.
I found a terrifying note in an Airbnb in the Appalachian Mountains. Last November, my family rented out an Airbnb up this winding road in the middle of the Appalachian Mountains. Everything was going smoothly, you know, like the first 3 or 4 nights. I did get a bit of a creepy vibe. One night, my parents were making dinner, and my little brother was going through stuff that was just on the kitchen counter of the Airbnb. He finds a notebook, and he's flipping through it, and he's like, Anna, what is this? It is a note written in very, like, creepy old cursive. I will read it to you. I could feel her watching. I know I shouldn't have looked. She was closer to the house than I expected. The creek covered the sound of her steps, if they made a sound. The light in the trailer never turns off. I have a feeling she knows why. And at first, I'm reading it, and I'm like, okay, weird. I realize there's a creek outside. It says the creek covered the sound of her steps. Then, I'm like, if there's a trailer on the other side of this cabin, I'm gonna freak out. There is, in fact, a trailer. If the sun goes down and there's a light on in the trailer, I'm literally going to, like, cry. And my parents always think I'm, like, dramatic. So when I told them, this is really creepy, can we please leave? They said, it's nothing. The sun goes down. I open the blinds. I look out. The trailer light is on. One dim, stringly light. Mind you, I did not have a bedroom. I had to sleep in the middle of the living room. And have to think about a lady standing in the field by the creek, staring me down and watching me. I text my friends, they're like, get the heck out. I text my boyfriend, he's like, get the heck out. Everybody texted me saying, get the heck out. I talked to my parents, they're like, it's fine. To stay 3 more nights there, I posted a video on TikTok about it, and all the comments were flooding saying, don't look outside. One of the nights, my dad, who was staying on the bottom floor, and they slept with their window open. No survival skills when it comes to Appalachian Mountains. And my dad said one night he shot awake because he smelled the worst smell that he ever smelled, and he thought one of us was in the kitchen burning something. He, like, ran into the kitchen and was like, who's cooking something? Is something burning? Nobody was awake, nobody else, and he described it as just, like, an extremely, like, pungent, disgusting smell coming through the window into his room. The morning that it's time for us to leave rolls around, and I'm literally like, I posted another video, it's literally me dancing, saying like, leaving the Airbnb. I was ecstatic to leave. We're all packing our things. I cannot make this up. There was a hairbrush lying on the ground perfectly next to the truck. Like a woman's hairbrush with hair still in it. It was nobody in my family's hairbrush. Little brother literally picks it up and he's like, is this your guys' hairbrush? I was like, put that down right now, because we had been leaving and coming from this cabin so many times throughout our trip. We never once saw the hairbrush. Then the last morning we were there, there's just an ominous hairbrush laying on the ground right next to the truck. Throw it in the creek, she can keep it, and we hightailed out of there and we drove home. And I've not been to the Appalachian Mountains since. Be careful if you go to the Appalachian Mountains. Those mountains have seen some things. They are literally older than dinosaurs, and I'm scared of them.
I was just trying to, like, lay down on the couch for a little bit, and then I started hearing this weird noise, and then Nims goes running into the playroom, so I'm like, what the f is that? And I, like, followed him. What is that? What is that noise? What is that? What? Jesus Christ! You almost gave me a heart attack. What is that noise? What? What? What the? What the? Nope. 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 No. Nope. Nope. I'll tell you what, if you can touch toys in this house, you better learn how to pick up a f***ing broom and clean.
I got lost in the Appalachian Mountains for 8 hours. For some context, I'm a USF trip leader for the outdoor recreation program. But before that, I was just a wee little lad that liked to go hiking. And one day I decided to hike part of the Appalachian Trail with my buddy Caleb. So me and my buddy Caleb got dropped off by my great-grandparents. My great-grandfather told me, "Oh, just follow everyone else, you'll be fine." We hiked for a few hours, and once we got to the view spot on the trail, we decided to hang out for a little bit and have some trail snacks. Everything seemed to be going okay, until it didn't. We'd been waiting up there for a while, and everyone had already left before us, so we started heading down the only other trail we could see. Then came a split in the trail. Since we couldn't see anybody, we picked the one that had like a blue sign on it. We figured, hey, at least this has got to lead somewhere, right? After 2 hours down this trail and not a single soul in sight or animal in sight, we started to get a little bit worried and talked a little bit about skinwalkers being on the Appalachian Trail and all. It's now 4 hours into this hike down, and we have no idea where we are. We haven't had cell service for hours, and we're completely out of trail snacks. No food, no water, no cell phone service, no contact with the outside world or anybody in society. And now the sun is starting to set. As the trees kind of kill off the last little bit of bright sunlight, it's sort of dimming down everywhere, and the leaves are eerily like shaking throughout the whole place. We start to pick up the pace in hopes that like, hey, if we just keep going on this trail, it'll go somewhere, so we gotta get somewhere before nightfall. Finally, we get to a little neighborhood clearing in the distance, and we see all these giant houses with huge like angled driveways, but there's not a single car or person in sight. We literally went and knocked on different doors, and nobody answered. At this point, I've got my pocket knife on me, like ready. We keep following the main trail of the like neighborhood through and through. And we finally walk into a campground, and we see people. We have like no shame or social anxiety at all at this point. We're just straight up like, hey, we've been lost for hours. Like, is there anywhere we can call someone? We need to call our grandparents. Thankfully, I still had like 2% of my phone battery left, so I could remember my great-grandparents' phone numbers. They told us, yeah, there's a like campsite ranger up ahead. Just ask him for a sat phone. We found the guy, called our grandparents, and just walked another mile to a lake where they met us and carried us home, and I was so exhausted. So yeah, make sure you know your trails you're walking on before you start to just walk in the woods.
In the summer of 1952, brothers Freddie and Eddie May were playing football at the local Flatwood school. They suddenly saw a burning, unidentified object fly across the sky and then crash into a local farmer's land. Of course, the brothers took off, along with their friends, to get their mother, Kathleen, and told her what in the world had just happened. She and everyone in the party got into the car, went over to the land, and sure enough, there was an unidentified object there that was mangled and steaming and glowing red. A 18-year-old National Guardsman named Eugene Lemon was at the site, and he had a flashlight and shined it over in the direction of the wreckage. He said that he saw a 10-foot being with green skin and large, round, red eyes. The creature then hissed at everyone and proceeded to float toward them. Well, frightened out of their minds, they obviously took off, and by the time they got back to town, everyone said that there had been a gas or something there that made them really nauseous, and some of them began to throw up. The local police and investigators went to the site of the farmer's land, but nothing was ever mentioned about what they saw. All they would comment was that everything had been gathered up and sent off to Washington, D.C. Andrew Smith was an individual who witnessed this, and he was shocked that people weren't more interested in it because a lot of UFO sightings occurred in the 50s during that time period. He did note that he was excited that it had made national headlines. He is now the curator of the Flatwoods Monster Museum and said that the town is very proud of their sign that you will see that welcomes you to Flatwoods. And this is the sign that you will see if you come visit Flatwoods. When asked if he believes that what he saw that night was something of another world, Smith just says that it's folklore, and you should decide for yourself.
It looked like a deer that forgot how to be a deer, and it was blocking his only way out. This is another not deer encounter that happened on the Blue Ridge Parkway near the Skyline Drive South entrance in Waynesboro, Virginia. So Grist one night just could not sleep and decided that he was going to take himself a little midnight drive up on the Blue Ridge Parkway. So he drives up there about a mile in, and he starts feeling this immediate sense of, dread after he turns his bike off. And he's not somebody who's usually scared of the dark. He says that the dark usually calms him, but there was just this, immediate, sense of dread, that it was thick and oppressive type of darkness. But he decided, I'm already up here, let me just stay here for a couple minutes. He tried to remind himself that there was nothing up there but wildlife, and he had a revolver and knew that he easily outmatched anything that was up there. His hair was starting to stand up on the back of his neck, and he just got this, sense that he wasn't alone. Grist was a vet, and he said that he immediately recognized that precise feeling, the precise feeling of feeling hateful eyes on you. Could have turned his bike on and used the lights for that, but he didn't want to do that because that would pretty much blind him from anywhere beyond where the lights are. And also his bike was loud, and he just really felt like he shouldn't draw any more attention to himself. After about 10 minutes, the anxiety was getting the better of him, and he decided that it was just time to head home. So he fired up his Suzuki and decided to head back towards the gate. And that's when he saw it. So he says that the term not deer is pretty fitting, but not entirely accurate. To him, it looked like somebody had tried to draw a deer that had only ever been described what a deer looked like instead of seeing a picture of one for themselves. And it was huge. Easily the biggest deer he had ever seen, and its lack of antlers indicated to him that it was a doe. Grist says that the head looked more bovine in shape, like a cow's head affixed to a deer's body, and the legs were completely out of proportion for a deer, they were way too long. And the body was extremely barrel-chested. Unfortunately, it was blocking his path, so he either had to get it to move, or he had to risk riding within a few feet of it, and he just did not want to get anywhere near this thing. He stopped and put his foot down and decided to try and frighten it away. He was flashing his high and low beams. That didn't work. He tried honking his horn. He tried yelling at it. Nothing was working. So he decided that he was going to get off his bike and find something to toss at it. Maybe that would spook it. As soon as he crossed into the other lane, it rose onto its hind legs, and he just froze. It took 2 jerky, unnatural steps towards him and started staring directly at him. Then it shook its head like a dog with a toy. After that, it hopped on 2 legs, until it went off over the side of the road where the overlook is. On that side was a sheer drop off, about 40 to 50 feet, and the angle of the hill was 75, 80 degrees. He hopped on his bike and started to speed out of there. As he was driving past where it had went off on the overlook, he decided to turn in that direction, and there was its head slightly peeking over the side of the road. There's just no way it could be standing anywhere. Like I said, it was a 40 to 50 foot drop, and it's at a really steep incline, but yet there its head was peeking over, staring at him. He revved his engine and just drove as fast as he could, and he said he never went back up to Skyline Drive alone, especially not at night. One time was enough. The Appalachian Mountains are just so old that we can't possibly know everything that is out there. Now, there's been a lot of speculation as to what a not deer even is. The most likely explanation, at least in my mind, would be a skinwalker, because it is trying to look like a deer but is slightly off. Some other suggestions are that the mountains are just so old, there's a type of energy here where it allows things from parallel dimensions or something like that to pass through from time to time. Whatever it was, it definitely wasn't a normal deer. It knew he was there, it was watching him, and it wanted him to know that it was watching him.
This happened in the summer of 2002. Me and some of my friends went out on a camping trip. We lived in New York, and all of us were city kids, but I had always wanted to check out the Appalachian Trail, so I convinced them to come with me. There were 4 of us in total, my roommate Derek, his twin brother Rick, and our other friend Cameron. We had planned on spending 2 weeks out there, and then we would call for a ride from however far we made it. It was summer vacation, and we all had a month without school or work, so it was kind of open-ended. If we wanted to, then we were open to calling it off early. We had been out there for a few days, and the exhaustion was starting to set in. The constant walking, the weight of our packs, and roughing it in the outdoors was wearing everyone down. I wasn't sleeping well, but I didn't want to quit. The days were long, and we didn't have much energy by the time we'd set up camp each night. My muscles ached, and it seemed like the sleepless nights dragged on forever. No matter how tired I felt, I just couldn't sleep right. Every little sound in the woods would wake me up, and my sleeping bag didn't seem to be warm enough. I would lie there tossing and turning, trying to pretend I was anywhere else. Still, I knew we were close to finishing this part of the trail, so I kept pushing myself. I think Cameron was feeling the same way, but we were all trying to be tough and not look weak. Nobody said it, but I think everyone was feeling run down. Even though I was exhausted, there was something about being out there that felt rewarding. We were experiencing the wilderness in a way we never had before, and despite the discomfort, it was worth it. One afternoon, we decided to take a break around midday. We had already been walking for hours, and the sun was high in the sky. Most of us were content to sit around and relax for a bit, but my friend Derek seemed to have more energy than the rest of us. While we were sitting around resting our feet and drinking water, Derek got up and wandered off to explore the area a bit. None of us thought much of it. He'd been like that the whole trip, always looking for something interesting to check out, while the rest of us tried to catch our breath. After a while, he came back and told us that he had found something. He didn't give many details, but he seemed pretty eager for us to see it. We'd had a good rest already, so we all stood up and followed him. He led us up a small hill just off the main trail. The climb wasn't too bad, but we were tired enough that it felt steeper than it probably was. When we got to the top, Derek pointed off into the distance. I squinted my eyes, trying to see what he was pointing at, but I didn't see it at first. Then he described it and pointed again. There, hanging from a tree branch in the distance, was something red or pink. At first we couldn't tell what it was, but it looked like a jacket, or maybe a sweater. It was odd seeing something like that out in the middle of nowhere. The trail was remote, and it wasn't common to see clothing just lying around. We started to worry that it might belong to someone who needed help, so we decided to go over and check it out. It was a fair distance away, probably close to 100 yards, maybe more. It was a rough walk, too, because there was no trail leading there. It was all over sharp, jagged rocks, with thick bushes getting in the way as well. When we finally got to the spot, we found that it was indeed a red jacket hanging from a tree branch. The fabric was weathered and faded, like it had been out in the elements for a long time. It was really more like a pale pink, but you could tell that it used to be red. It was torn in a few places, and the colors had almost completely washed out. We all stood there for a moment, unsure of what to make of it. Derek walked up to get a closer look, but there wasn't much to see beyond the obvious wear and tear. As we started to look around the area, we found a few more things that made the situation stranger. Not far from the jacket, we came across an old water bottle. It was the kind you'd take hiking, but it was caked with dirt and had clearly been there for a while. A few steps beyond that, we spotted a pair of hiking boots. One of them was lying on its side, half buried in leaves, while the other was still upright. It looked like someone had taken them off and left them behind, but we knew that wasn't likely. Then we saw something that made us stop in our tracks. Near the boots, we found what looked like a bone. It was partially covered by the underbrush, but there was no mistaking what it was. I wanted to think that it belonged to a deer, but given what we found leading up to it, I couldn't help but feel that it was human. I am in no way qualified to tell the difference, and neither were any of my friends, so we didn't touch anything else. None of us wanted to stick around after that. We quickly backed away from the area and made our way back to the trail. Once we were back, we hiked out and reported what we found to the authorities. Later, we learned that the remains belonged to a hiker who had gone missing over a year ago. They had been searching for him for months, but the trail is vast, and it's easy to get lost out there. After that, we called an end to our trip because none of us was in the mood to keep going.
This person starts off the story by saying that they know that this sounds fantastical and wild, but it is very true, and it takes place in the backcountry of West Virginia, which people know is old and haunted. And the craziest thing about the story is that it wasn't just witnessed by one person, it was witnessed by 4 people, and all 4 people had unfortunate circumstances happen to them after this event, and they believe that it was directly due to this event. When he was 17 years old, he had a bad experience camping with his friends near haunted train tunnels. This particular place was also a site of sudden tragic deaths. Here's a little history of some of the sudden tragic deaths nearby this site. So the first one is of a mother and son drowning in a creek nearby. Then there was a shootout with police officers and the drug dealer was unalived. Also, many years before, cheap laborers had been unalived, building a double train tunnel. They were also buried in a long-forgotten little graveyard nearby the tunnels. And that has since been found and restored, thankfully. Hugh and 4 of his friends decided that they were going to go camping near this area for their last little get-together before they went off after graduation. This was a private property on the backside of a big hill which the creek flows. It flows in a huge several-mile-long bend. Now, they set up camp and they have a fire going, and shortly after after nightfall, him and his cousin sat on a creek bank maybe 20 yards away from the camp. They were spotlight fishing in the water, and then they began to hear like this rhythmic slosh in the water. It sounded like somebody was wading in the water, maybe like halfway up to their shins. So they shined their light around the stream when they spotted something. It looks like somebody is wading through the water. They can see this symmetrical and rhythmically consistent disturbance made by the water of like somebody is standing in the water and sloshing closer to them, except for there's nobody there. There's no body doing it. They would turn their spotlight off. It would start, but when illuminated, it would start again. It was reacting to them, and this was the moment that their stomach would clench because they would realize that what was happening was not a fish reacting to them. It was something. It scared them pretty badly, but they decided to keep it to themselves, and they decided to go back to the fire where all of their friends were. As they were on their way back, they heard the sloshing make it to where they were on the bank. And then it just stopped. But given the speed that it was moving at, it had sped up with them as they had walked towards their friends. And when they got back to the camp, their friends had actually heard that sound, and they figured that they had either gotten in the water for some reason or that they had riled up some fish. And they just kind of played this off because they didn't want to tell their friends what had happened. But after the sound ended at the creek bank, they saw a tall grass being disturbed. It was by something they couldn't see, and it was running around the perimeter of their circular cleared campsite. Now, they clarified that this could have been an animal, but it was fast. This would scare the ever-living crap out of me. Then they began to hear what sounded like a man talking to them, but it was speaking specifically in each of their ears. It was actually all happening in their left ear for some reason, and at first it just sounded like gibberish, but then it became a little bit more clear after about 15 to 20 seconds, and it started saying that they should not be there. You should not be here. You guys need to leave. And then after a little bit, it got more forceful, and it was speaking directly to each of them and saying, you need to leave. Now, this absolutely terrified them at first because they thought that there was either a group of people or a person that was coming up on their campsite that was dangerous. They were all frozen with fear, but then adrenaline hit and they started running back to their ATVs. All four of them saw what looked like a tall black shadow figure with a hat on leaning against their ATVs. Now, pay attention. This thing was just relaxing against their ATVs, but it straightened up as soon as they saw it. It just sort of hung there staring at them for a few seconds, but it didn't have any feet. The bottom half of it looked kind of wavy in a way, and it stood out against the dark night behind it. The girl that was with them broke their fear freeze by screaming, and then she all of a sudden just starts running towards the tunnels where all those people had been unalived. Interestingly, when they went to start the ATV, it actually struggled to start. It turned over sluggishly as like the battery had been drained or something. Despite working fine not long before they rode it down there. The entire event happened within a course of maybe 5 to 10 minutes, within maybe an hour of the sun going down. But they actually decided to put their story out there, and they received a lot of feedback from people who had actually had scary encounters themselves in this area. Even a guy who Hugh worked with, who he actually didn't know was even in the area. He said that Hugh's uncle had hired him to trap in that area, and it was the only area that he wouldn't check traps alone at night. He said it was almost like the animals leave that place at night. No less than a month later, his uncle, who owns the property, was up on a hill raccoon hunting. It was nighttime, he was with his dog, and at some point his dog was on a rock face above him, and the dog accidentally kicked a rock or something, and it fell off that rock face and it hit his uncle in the neck. This messed his uncle up pretty badly, and it paralyzed almost his entire body. He still had some functionality on his left side though. They never figured out how he got back to his ATV, turned it around, and drove himself out of there. This part is important. It wasn't until maybe 2 or 3 years later that his story actually made it out on the local FB groups, and his uncle just randomly texts his mother out of nowhere. Hugh describes his uncle as a salt of the earth, working, hunting, farming man. Even working past his retirement as a millionaire. Just a stand-up, funny, cool dude. He's easygoing, but also no nonsense. And this is what he tells his mother. He said, I have something to tell you, and I will probably never tell you or anybody else again, but that night that I got hit with a rock, that tall figure, that black figure with the hat on that your son saw, that man helped me get up on my ATV and drive it back home. Hugh said that until he heard that, he had always thought that this shadow man was a bad presence, was not good. But he says now thinking back on it, while the whispering in the ear telling them to leave, he does think that whatever that was also trying to protect them from maybe something scarier or evil. And he can't really think of anything much scarier than that, but he's appreciative of that dark figure.
There was a family who lived in the Appalachian Mountains in West Virginia. And, they were just a normal, average, everyday family. And they had this young son named James. Now, James loved to play outside, but they started to notice he was going out behind the house in the woods, spending a lot of time, alone in this area back behind their house. And, they often wondered what was James doing while he was going out in the woods. Well, James started to come home from the woods at night, and he would have these scratches on him and bruises and bite marks. And so his mother became very alarmed. And she sits down with James one night and says, James, what is going on? Why are you coming back with these bruises and these, scratches and stuff? And he goes, Mommy, I am playing with the people in the woods. And she goes, what people in the woods? And he goes, the people that are out there in the woods. They play with me. And sometimes they get mad and they get angry. And so the mother tells the father, what's going on. And the father grabs his 3 brothers and they go out into the woods trying to figure out who these people are living in the woods. So they go out in the woods and they're searching. They don't find anything. And they start to think maybe it's just a young boy's imagination and, he's just falling and stuff. And that's how he's getting these bruises and whatnot. So one night, James's mother is awake and can't sleep. She decides to go and check on all the kids. She walks past James' room and she notices that he's not in his bed and his window is open. So she runs and wakes up her husband and tells him, James has left. He's not in the house. He's went out the window. So James's dad jumps up and gets up and he goes into the woods and he's calling, James, James. And finally his dad, hears James calling his name back. And he finds James and he says, come on, James, what are you doing out in the middle of the woods? And he said, I'm with the people. I'm with the people. And he goes, come on, we're going back home. And he said, Daddy, they don't like you taking me away. And that's when the father, he looks around and he can see there are several people standing in the woods. And so he grabs James and picks him up and they just start running back to the house as fast as he can. And he gets inside and he locks the doors. Well, he tells James, you are not to go out in the woods anymore. You have to stay, in the house. And at nighttime, we're locking the doors and the windows. And, he was terrified. So several weeks pass, and they keep James from going into the woods and nothing happens until one night they see, the father sees that one of the windows in the house has been left open. And so the father runs, and thinks, oh, James, has just snuck out again and went back into the woods. So he runs into James's room and is like, James, are you okay? And he goes, yes, I'm fine, Daddy. And he goes, oh, I thought you went out the window. And James goes, no, I opened the window for the people so they could come into the house. And the dad just had this bewildered look on his face that, what, did someone get into the house? So the father, starts staying awake every night, wondering if something had gotten inside the home. And sure enough, one night, he's sitting in the living room, and he sees a man walk by him and go to the window and go out of the window. So he, jumps up, grabs his rifle, runs out the door and says, "Leave my son alone, leave my son alone." And he's chasing after this man. But that's when he gets a better look and he realizes this man does not have any head. And the man just sort of runs into a tree and vanishes. So the father, at this point is just totally terrified, and he runs back to the house and gets inside. And so he goes and nails shut all of the windows and, boards up all the doors and says, "We are only leaving through the front door and everyone has to be in at night. No one's going outside." The next night, they see James, and he's standing next to the window in the living room, even though it's boarded up and it's nailed shut. And he's saying, I can't let you in. I don't know how to. I can't let you in." And the father's like, "James, who are you talking to?" And he said, "The people out there, they want me to let them in. They want me to let them in." And so, he grabs James and he says, "Look, these people aren't your friends. They are bad people. And the only way they can come in is if you let them in through the window. So we have to keep the windows closed at night. We have to keep them boarded up."
Oh God, yeah. All the time. And I will say, a lot of the times that I did that, nothing happened. I would wake up, notice that they were open, and just close them real quick, and nothing happened. But sometimes something did happen. Almost always when something happened, I would see something. I would see like something unexplainable looking in the window, but I would also hear stuff as well. We have woods right by my apartment that I'm in now. Our last apartment had woods, and my childhood home had woods. So anytime this happened, I would hear or see something coming from those woods. I've seen strange deer standing straight up when no trees are in sight, just weird shadows crawling around, things like that. I've heard my name being called, screaming, laughing, crying, all those types of things. While I do still hear those things, if the curtain's closed, it's not as abundant or as loud as when it's open. And I guess because they can see you, they know you're there, they're trying to get your attention. You don't just close your curtain so you don't see these things, although that's good enough reason, but you don't want these things to see you. If you, and this isn't just for like creatures in Appalachia, this is for anyone. Have you guys seen the show You? If you have a light on in your house and it's dark outside, you are a fishbowl to anyone or anything that wants to look at you. Close your curtains.
I was born, raised, and still live here in the Appalachian Mountains. Growing up here, you experience some unexplainable things. There's a set of unwritten rules or warnings or tips that you're told growing up here on how to stay safe when you're out in the mountains. In the last video, I went over some of the rules, like don't whistle. If you hear someone calling your name, but you know that you're out in the woods alone, you heard nothing. Even if the voice sounds familiar, do not respond. Try not to go out in the woods alone after dark. Make sure you close all your blinds and lock all your windows and doors at dusk. Honestly, I left out some of the most important ones, like if you hear something weird, no you didn't. Or if you see something weird, no you didn't. Saw nothing, you heard nothing. But let's say you do hear something. If it sounds like it's really close to you, it's actually really far away. And the same thing goes for if it sounds like it's really far away, it's actually really close to you. If you're unfamiliar with the area, never leave an unmarked trail. Trails are marked for a reason. Don't look in the tree line. You can look at the trees, just try not to look through them because you might not like what you see. The same thing goes for if you hear somebody calling your name, don't respond, but if you hear somebody whistling, also do not respond or do not whistle back. There's still so many more unwritten rules that I heard growing up. If you live in Appalachia or if you've even just traveled to this region, chances are that you've experienced something unexplainable for yourself.
So we're sitting out here in the Appalachian Mountains. We got Linda over here, deep in the Appalachians. And then there's Will over this side.
Working the
still. Now they say in the Appalachian Mountains that you never whistle after dark. Linda, why is that?
Because it's like almost like an invitation for something to come to you. And whistling is supposedly like draws evil spirits or something. At least that's what I've heard.
Will, do you believe that? Yeah, I actually do, though. I wouldn't be out here whistling by myself.
Bet you'd be whistling if we're around there, right?
Yeah, I know you guys got me.
I can't whistle well, but
I can't either.
it's legends like these that we like to test every once in a while. Because I believe the dead are sleeping and we won't stir their spirits at all. But,
it's not the dead you gotta worry about.
so you think it's like a
Yeah, it's not
Dogman call?
It's not the dead, it's like the evil spirits that have never been alive. Or it's like the, weird cryptid kind of things that crawl around here. That's what you gotta worry about. That's the dog.
Oh.
The only thing you're calling right now is the dog.
Yeah. What do you think, Will? You think there's gonna be some evil spirits that come up in here or what?
I don't put it past you. Yeah. I'm pretty sure there's some weird stuff walking around out here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Huh?
You never know. You got what are those things, man? The Wendigos.
Oh yeah, the skinwalkers and stuff.
Skinwalkers.
Yeah, the Wampus Cat.
Not just playing
the Clan. You might have just called them. They're trying to enjoy their bonfire and they hear Will over here whistling in the woods. Here they come. We got a better bonfire.
If you've ever felt watched or seen something just beyond the light, you're not alone. Share your story in the comments below and don't forget to subscribe. As always, stay safe, stay aware, and question everything.